this evening in conversation with. You're all very welcome. I'm going to hand over to Tim. Tim, can you introduce yourself and one thing you're grateful for, and then we'll get going, because I think actually time's slightly of the essence because of the clap.
Okay.
We'll finish at 5 to 8.
Okay, well, lovely to meet everybody. Thanks very much for inviting me, Sally. I'm Tim Lambert, and I run a management and leadership development company in Manchester called K. Lambert Associates. I've been doing that for, well, since 2004, and I was an actor before then. You'll find out a little bit more about that in the presentation to follow. One thing I'm very grateful for, lots of things, but our neighbours on our street are fantastic. We've got a WhatsApp group. We keep posting funny memes and videos and jokes, and people, whenever they're going to the shops, are asking, do you need anything? And so our community on our street has been absolutely fabulous. And Thursday night is always quite a special treat to go out and see everybody on the street. So looking forward to that. Okay. So if you want me to carry on, Sally, I'll share my screen so I can show you the presentation that I'm going to take you through. So can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, if you have a question that you want to ask, I'm very happy for you to write it in the chat box, because at least then you won't forget it. So if something props up and comes to mind, then please scribble it down, and at least we'll have a record and we can go back and try and answer some questions for you to the best of my ability. But the subject is coping with unprecedented change. I think it's no understatement, is it, to say that we're going through a lot of change at the moment. And you know, we're all finding our own ways to deal with that. I myself, I'm slightly in denial. I'm pretending I'm in Tuscany. The giraffes on the wall are actually, I can't move them. They're part of the wallpaper behind me. So they're a bit out of place in Tuscany, but even so, you know, that's where I'm transporting myself, and that keeps me sane throughout this period. As an extrovert, I'd much rather be out there talking to people, interacting with people. I can't do that. So, you know, that's one of the ways in which I'm coping. But it's really important with current events that we look after ourselves. We really take extra care to look after our friends, our families, our colleagues, and particularly we need to take care of ourselves. And very few of you are as old as I am, I think, so you may not fully remember this, but for some of you who remember the good old days of Woolworths, do you remember Woolworths? And this wonderful pick and mix section that they used to have in Woolworths. Well, when my daughter was very young, she got into hot water because there was a sign up in our local Woolworths near the pick and mix which said, please help yourself. And that's exactly what she did. There was nothing there that said you had to pay for it. It just said, please help yourself. So she'd go into Woolworths and she'd help herself. It's a bit like when you come across ATM machines where they say free cash withdrawals. So I imagine that wouldn't really stand up in court if you attempted to take some out. But what I'm asking you to do today is focus on helping yourself. And throughout this presentation, take as much or as little as you want from it to help yourself. The presentation is designed to help you personally handle this intense period of change, but also to support you in any way possible when you're dealing with your colleagues. So in terms of who I am, I'm the director of K. Lambert, which I set up in 2004, and I work with clients all over the world. Global clients, sometimes local clients and national clients, but often clients that have globally dispersed teams. So actually I've been relatively busy because a lot of my work does involve working with teams that are globally dispersed, in which case we're using this sort of technology. They can't actually get together physically many times of the year. So I've been doing this for many years, coaching. I do psychometric testing and run training events and facilitate team events. I'm also a recent author. I've published a couple of books in the last few months. which you can see there. I've mentioned I'm a cat lover because she may come in at some point and does love getting up on the desk and possibly saying hello. So just to warn you. And the other thing is I'm an ex-actor. I often refer to myself as an actor in recovery, a bit like an alcoholic. Once it's in your system, it's very difficult to get out again. And just occasionally I'm hauled out of retirement by my wife, who is a screenwriter and an immersive technology storyteller. And this is my latest outing. So I just put that up there as a warning to you that if you misbehave and give me too much grief tonight, then that's the version of me you might end up seeing. Okay, but this is from a performance that we did at St. George's Hall in Liverpool last year. Okay, so let's think about change. And what it is about change that freaks us out. I think there's a misnomer about change, and I try to stamp it down really, but it's become too common for us to say people don't like change, and that's not actually true, really, is it? People do like change. I mean, you can change your hairstyles, you change your clothes, you change where you go on holiday, you redecorate your home. We embrace change. We love change. We get bored if we're not mixing things up from time to time. So we need to be careful that we don't live that lie that people don't like change. We do like change, not change itself that freaks us out. But what I'm going to share with you is that these are the things typically which are aspects of the change or the way the change unfolds and is delivered. These are the things that freak us out. Legitimacy is a key one. Why are we doing this change? Where's it come from? What are the motives? Are there ulterior motives? Are people being honest with us? Are the right people being involved in making the decisions about what the change is going to look like? And proximity, how closely does it affect us? And are we involved in that? If it affects us closely, do people bother to tell us about it or talk to us about it or reassure us? So I'm going to go through this list in the presentation and pull a few of these out. So this is me, well over 30 years ago. And if I had woken up 30 odd years ago and looked in the mirror, and instead of seeing that, saw this, I would have freaked out. I mean, my hair's a lot longer. I look more like a scarecrow since lockdown. So I'm with you on the hair front, guys. But that would have been a huge shock to me 30 odd years ago to think, oh my God, what's happened? But because I've aged gradually, I've grown into myself, and the change has felt imperceptible. So it's not really been a problem. Yeah, I've got a few more aches and pains. I can't run as fast as I used to be able to run. There are things I can't do now, but there are lots of things I can do now that I couldn't do when I was that age as well. So that because the change has been gradual, I've been able to accommodate it. And I'm a big believer in slow change. It's why we're struggling so much at the moment, because the change has been foisted on us. We've had no option. We just have to get on with it. People have been forced into their homes to do home working without any preparation, any time to set their home offices up if they're not used to working at home. And it's the pace of the change that has been particularly freaky. So bear in mind that if you have any role to play in introducing change, give people time. That's really important. Now, the other thing about change is who's doing it to us and how closely does it affect us. So, if I was to ask you to get out your purses or your smartphones now and go and give them to a complete stranger, and then allow that stranger to start rearranging your apps or tidying up your purse or your handbag, throwing away what appears to be a load of rubbish and detritus and all the receipts that you've got and cards that you appear not to use very often. I mean, that you probably would not respond really well to that happening. But that's what it can feel like with a lot of change that happens in organizations, because people come in to your personal space, into your personal arena, and they start rooting around in your personal stuff that is precious to you, stuff that you're comfortable with, stuff that you're familiar with. My wife goes absolutely spare whenever there's been a computer update, and she switches on a computer, and for some unknown reason in the update process, all her files have got reorganized. I don't know if you've noticed that. I mean, she's not alone. It's incredibly annoying. It's like, leave it alone, it's mine. And that's another reason why we can react so strongly to change when people start messing around without things that belong to us. There's quite a lot of studies being done around neuroscience to try and identify how changes affect us psychologically and at the brain level. And it may not be proof, but there's some fairly compelling evidence starting to emerge that suggests that, for instance, with uncertainty, it's one of the worst emotional states that we experience, and it can actually induce more stress than having real physical pain. So when we're unsure about what's going on and why it's happening and how it's going to unfold, which perfectly describes the situation we're in right now, no wonder people are feeling really, really stressed. I wrote a book about burnout recently. And what's really interesting is that the instances of burnout have massively increased since lockdown. And you think, well, that's odd, isn't it? Because everyone's at home. But everybody's at home, not knowing what's going on, trying to juggle 15 different things, putting themselves under massive and enormous pressure to be brilliant and perfect at them all, and not knowing how long it's going to go on for, where it's going to end. That level of uncertainty has a deep impact on us. So people need clarity, they need information. The cat has just walked in, so she may jump up in a minute. The other thing that we don't respond to well is being excluded. If we're being excluded, it actually triggers the same part of the brain where we experience pain. So when change is unfolding, but we're not actually being invited in, we're not being invited to share our opinions or shape the change, we're going to have a very difficult relationship with that change as a result. And something else around integrity, which comes back to this whole thing about the legitimacy of the change. You know, where is this change coming from? And who's leading it? And what are they telling us? And do we believe them? So if people have told us certain things in the past about the way things are going to pan out, and then they palpably do not turn out that way, then obviously we're going to be a bit more suspicious about whether or not they're telling us the truth. So the next time they say, oh, we're going to change this and it's going to be brilliant, we're a bit more cautious, okay? If we've been lied to once, then we're going to be, once bitten, twice shy. And we need to be very, very careful that we're honest and we're straight with people about the reasons for the change and what people are likely to encounter with the change. Because as soon as we start lying to them or manipulating them or pulling the wool over their eyes, it's going to have a very detrimental effect on them and their well-being, but also it's going to affect how well that change actually happens. And then also under this neuroscience of change heading, simplification. We're simple beings at the end of the day. We want simplification. We're always looking for shortcuts. We're looking for ways to organize information in simple ways. And if the change that is being presented to us is complex, complicated, where you try to ask a simple question, you cannot get a simple answer to that question, then that creates real confusion. And that confusion then triggers fear and anxiety and significant fatigue. And additionally, I think if you imagine that we're a sponge and we can soak up and hold a significant amount of water, but once that sponge is completely filled up, the water's no longer going to be absorbed. It's just going to drain off, and that's why. A problem that I see in a lot of the organizations I work with is they introduce far too much change all at the same time, rather than doing it in a step way. We'll do this change, we'll let it bed in, and then we'll bring this change on board. They pile it on, and typically they're piling change on top of what people were ordinarily already doing. So it's an additional load, and there is a limit to how much we can withstand at any one point for that change to be successful. And it's a bit like having what I call a change bank account. So every time we live through very poorly constructed and poorly executed change, our bank account gets depleted. But adversely, when we live through a great change, when things are going wonderfully well and we see the benefits and we're getting the rewards, well, that actually fills up our bank account. It credits our bank account, and we're much more likely then to embrace the next change that comes along. One thing to be mindful of in yourself and in your colleagues, your friends, your families, your neighbours, is that there are warning signs that we can spot when people are overloaded with change and they're being affected by too much of it. And these are some of those warning signs that you can look out for and respond to. Don't ignore, because they can very quickly escalate. And with isolation, we've got, we shouldn't have social isolation. We've got to be physically separated, but there's no reason why we can't continue to be emotionally connected with people. And it's very important that we keep those channels of communication open, and that we don't increase people's burden by asking them or expecting them to be doing more and more and more and living with more and more change on top of what we're already going through. So be very mindful of these signs and take steps to intervene. The final place that we tend to end up is back at home with our family, which is, most of us, that's where we retreat. And, you can often feel that you can have strained relationships at home. And right now, the last thing we need is strained relationships at home. But I do note with alarm the increase in domestic violence cases, with people being cooped up in the same place with abusers. And of course, that's something that we need to take urgent steps to try and remedy. So Peter Drucker it was who said people don't mind change, they mind being changed. So change, yeah, it's great if we have some control of it. It's something that we can see the benefit of, and we're willing to go with it, then typically it's okay. It's when people jump in and say, right, from now on, you're going to be doing this, that's typically when we have quite a different sort of response. Now, the thing about change is we know it's going to happen. We can't really hide away from it. We have to embrace it in some way. There's a limit to how much we can control or prevent, but we can influence and we can determine how we are likely to respond to the change. And people will respond to the change in all sorts of different ways. Some of those ways are less productive than others, but they are actually all legitimate. And here's an example of the way that people can respond to changes. Some people just straight away see the harm in the change and adopt the role of the protester. Now, the protester is not a bad role to adopt where the change is bad. Yeah, we need people to stand up and say, hang on a minute, this isn't right, this is wrong. Okay, it's the manner in which people protest which will determine whether or not the change will be reshaped. So just railing against the change in itself may not achieve very much, but to throw legitimate concerns and put those on the table is actually an important thing to do. Some people can just feel very trapped by the change. They can feel victimized by the change and start to feel paranoid about the change. Why is this happening to me? And that's not a very resourceful state. There are others who just sort of sit back and let it unfold and think, well, I'll roll with it. I'll just see where it's going. And, I'm not going to help it along, but I'm not going to do anything to sabotage it. I'm just going to I'll sit on the bus and see where this takes me. And then there are those who, potentially the majority who participate in the change, see what they can do to make it work, give it their best shot, try and factor it in, do their best. And then there's a small group who stand alone perhaps, and this is the real performers who not only embrace the change, they shape the change, they inform the change, they look for further opportunities to derive benefits from the change. And at any point as we go through change, we could adopt any one of these roles, and we could move through all of them. But be mindful of where are you right now in terms of the change that you're experiencing. Are you still in the protester? Are you still railing against it? Or are you actually starting to look for ways to accommodate this? Doesn't mean we have to like it, but accommodate it, get something out of it. Are you playing a more active role in the change as it unfolds? One of the things that determine how we approach change is some of our personal preferences. So, sorry about that. So if you look at this graph and you were to say, which of these two things are most important to you? Where would you place yourself on the line? So just as you're looking at that, think, well, do I veer more? Is my interest more towards people? Is that what I care most about? And people and relationships and how people are feeling, is that most important to me? Or actually, am I, as I'm going through change, am I more interested in the tangible, the practical, the physical elements of the change? Where would you place yourself on that continuum, either towards things or towards people? And then having done that, if you do the same with this, so where do you place yourself in terms of your preference for needing stability? I like things to stay the same. I'm more comfortable with the familiar and the traditional and things not changing too much. Or are you one of those people who actually is a discoverer and an explorer, and you love opening up new doors and new possibilities, and that thrills you and that excites you, and you love research and seeing what's out there? So think about where you are on those two scales. And then when you put the two together, this might give you a hint as to the sort of role you're best placed to play when dealing with change. So for instance, if your preference is more towards people and stability, then perhaps the role you play is more of a caring role. It's supporting people and trying to protect them from any negative and harmful effects of the change, helping them to stabilize really and hold on to what they've already got. And that's a really vital role. It might be that your preference is more around things, over here, and exploration, and that means that perhaps you're more investigative, you're more into the research and thinking about how do we make this work, what are the possibilities that we could explore here. So all of us will approach change differently. There are always valid ways of approaching change, but as I say, some of them are more productive than others. I wonder how many of you have heard of VUCA in your professional life. I don't know if anyone.
Yes, we have. We had a resilience training.
Fantastic.
And, yeah, I think Susan and I were on there. I don't recognize anybody else who attended that.
Okay.
If you haven't seen it. Yeah.
All right. So VUCA is interesting. VUCA was an acronym developed by the American military Army Training Corps just after the end of the Cold War, and it was their way of trying to describe what the new world looked like. And it's a perfect description, really, of what the world looks like today with COVID. But it's volatile. Things are changing very, very quickly. Different announcements coming from different quarters all the time. It's very much shifting sands, and that's not just within our own country, but across the whole world. And it's very uncertain in terms of the way it's going to unfold. We don't know how long it's going to last and what the overall impact's going to be. It's having a multifarious impact on us. It's very complex in terms of the way it's affecting every aspect of our lives, and the solutions to it are also very complex. And the messages that we're getting are ambiguous. So we're confused. Yeah, what is alert? What does that actually mean? What does that require of us? Can we go out? Can we not go out? Can we sell our house and invite people in to have a look at our house, but we can't invite our friends into our house? There's all these mixed messages which are creating all sorts of confusion. So this definition of a VUCA world, you could say, is a pretty good description. I'm not a big fan of it, I have to say, because what it does is it tends to describe the pain associated with change, but it doesn't really talk about any of the gains associated with change. It's quite a negative take on situations that we find ourselves, but it describes the landscape of change, but it doesn't give us any clues as to how we should navigate our way through that landscape. So I've been toying with how I might be able to change VUCA, and I decided to add a couple of things. And I thought, well, change is exciting, isn't it? We like change. It's great. Change is as good as the rest. We like going to new places, seeing new people. And change is also rewarding. We get new rewards that we might not have anticipated that were available to us before because we changed something. But maybe some of you have spotted that if I put an ENR in VUCA, what I actually end up is with this. And I don't think anybody wants anything like this right now. I think we're coping with far too much. The last thing we need is VUCA. So instead, I'm going to propose that we adopt ORCA. I think this is a more optimistic, hopeful, positive way through change. And what it stands for is opportunity, rewards, creativity, and advantages. You see, I do believe that with any change, wherever it comes from, however unpopular it is, however unwelcome it is, it does create new opportunities if we're prepared to look for them. Things that were previously considered impossible or unthinkable, now suddenly they're on the table, and we can. The amazing things that people have done in response to the situation they found themselves in, and they've just gone for it and are saying, well, okay, why not? Give it a go. I know so many people who are seriously thinking about their careers at the moment, and whether when this is all over, they're going back to the jobs that they were in. Okay, so lots of things become possible. And if we pursue some of those opportunities, there are huge rewards in terms of new insights that we might gain, skills that we might acquire. Sometimes it's even financial rewards, since we embark on a course of action that changes our fundamental health and well-being and financial well-being. And the other thing is that it can, if we let it, unleash enormous levels of creativity. They do say, someone must remind me of the quote, is it necessity is the mother of invention? But it's amazing how creative people have been and can become when their backs are up against it. When they're suddenly thrown into an unusual situation. And it's been incredible to see some of the things that people have come up with, some of the humour that's been unleashed, the talent that's been put out there in response to this situation has demonstrated massive levels of creativity. And I think that this is advantageous for us as human beings because it's good for our psyche to be stimulated in this way. We do not, being overstable is not good for us. We do need to be mentally stimulated. We need to be mentally challenged. We need to exercise our change muscles in order to be able to challenge some things about the way we work that are not actually helpful. So we're being forced now to confront, should I have to commute 2 hours every day to go to work? Do I need to be stuck in an office from 8 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, staring at a screen? Is there another way of doing this? Is there another way of delivering our work? So that's why I suggest that we adopt ORCA. I also think that to a certain extent, we have to anchor ourselves through change. Change is slippery. And this isn't about fighting against it. This isn't about denying it. It's about rolling with it and without falling over. It's about anchoring ourselves, let's say, to the mast of change. And in order for us to experience change productively and positively, it always pays to go into it with a contingency. Because if we've got plans that, we've got plan B and plan C, where, you know, we'll try this, and if it doesn't work, then we'll try that. We always feel that much more secure. I remember Clive Woodward, who used to coach the England rugby team, spoke about a technique he used called teacup, which stood for thinking clearly under pressure. And it was imagine in advance everything that could happen, and imagine in advance how you're going to deal with it, so that when you find yourself in that situation, you can very quickly move to the solution that is at hand, rather than having to think it up on the spot. So have a contingency. Also, have the humility to accept that you're going to get it wrong. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up. And I've screwed up big time all my life. And, you know, actually, sometimes it's had quite negative consequences, but the majority of times it's actually really helped me. It's a huge learning process, and I think I'm better for it. So try things, and if they don't work, have the humility to accept they don't work, rather than keep banging on with it, and then adapt, try something different. Having the nerve, be bold, try some things, even if they seem stupid or they're not fully formed. Sometimes we're waiting for the perfect solution. If we wait forever for the perfect solution, we're not going to find it, and the problem's going to run away from us before we get there. And then as we move from one approach to the other, let's not do it in a lurching way, but in a controlled way. Let's glide from one process of the change to the other. And then the last element of this is expertise, which I think is critical. And without betraying too much of my political views here, I think one of the difficulties that we've had in this country is our, certainly from government levels, is the way we treat experts, and have historically treated experts and valued experts. But as you go through change, it's incredibly important that you surround yourself with experts, with a variety of expertise, people who have different opinions, different viewpoints, different experiences, different skills to offer. And not only surround yourself with them, but listen to them, really listen to them and embrace what they're saying, rather than trying to go it alone and think, oh, who needs experts? So these are some of the change anchors I think are important. So I just wanted to share, if it's okay, a few slides on some of the things that you can do to help people through the change. And most of this is really about communication. How do we give people a leg up? How do we help them through? Some of you may be familiar with what's called the Kübler-Ross change curve, which it's not really a change curve, actually. It's a model of grief. So, you know, I'm not overly happy about it being commandeered for change itself. Yeah, there are some changes which are utterly awful and abysmal, and we do grieve. So the Kübler-Ross change curve really describes what that grieving process looks like. But I think possibly in the state, you know, with COVID, you could argue that actually it does feel a bit like a grieving process. And as we go through that, it's really important that you help people create alignment with what's going on, so that whatever you implement to cope with that change, it's consistent with their values, your principles, your culture, your ways of working, so that it feels aligned with the way you do things and who you are, and there's an authenticity about it. And it's also important to raise contribution levels, get people involved, don't leave them out in the cold. And where possible, excite and motivate them and help them see what some of the possibilities might be in it for them. And any change is about helping us move out of our comfort zone. So we want to stretch capability. We want to use this as an opportunity where we can, where it is possible, to help people learn new things, consider new things, just in some cases, just take time to consider where they are and where they want to be. And vitally important, tell them what you know. Absolutely essential. Don't leave them in the dark. In terms of telling them what you know, this is a really simple way of structuring your communication. It's called CTQR, and simply stands for, first of all, you describe the context. So the situation that you find yourself in, and it's a context that most people will readily already recognize. You then talk about the trigger that has invited you to revisit that context. What's changed suddenly, or what new information has come to light? that forces us to revisit the situation we're in, and then ask as an exam question, or frame as an exam question what it is that you need to address. You know, so what is it we need to do about X, Y, and Z? How are we, for instance, how are we going to ensure that our people do not start to feel isolated when working from home? That would be an example of an exam question. And then the response is where you offer your solutions, your suggested solutions. So it's a very simple and structured way of presenting an idea, particularly where change is concerned. The other thing I'd say is that we must always remember with change that it doesn't matter what type of change it is, very early on we will fall into what I call the loser trap. It doesn't matter whether it's a change that you've brought on yourself and invited and are looking forward to, or it's something that's being done to you. Any change that you experience, there will be a temporary dip in performance or productivity. It always happens. If you move house, great. You've gone to your new house, you love your new house, but you've got weeks or months of getting familiar with your new environment. So things that you used to be able to do really quickly, you can't do as quickly. You've got to work out the best commute to work. You've got to work out where are the best shops. You've got to work out how long it takes to do the school run, all of those things. So there's that learning process as a result of change. And that's called a loser trap. And that is called a loser trap because often when we dip into it and people think, wow, this is hard and we're not getting anywhere, we're going backwards. That's the point when people think, oh, let's screw it then, stop it. Let's stop this change and let's go back to where we were before. But if you tell people right up front that this is how change works, there will be a dip. But if we manage it well, it's going to be a short dip and it's not going to be too deep. So the pain isn't going to be too painful. But we need to keep the faith and we have to have a plan and we have to communicate with people and not pull the wool over their eyes and say, oh, it's going to be from day one, it's going to be fantastic, because people just don't believe you and very quickly they'll find out it's not like that. And then the last one here is SAMS. I call it SAMS, and this is that just recognizing that in any change process, not everything changes. You know, we can get a bit, we can catastrophize if we're not careful and think, oh my God, it's all changing, it's all up in the air. But actually, let's bring it back down to earth and say, some of the stuff is actually going to stay the same. In fact, quite a lot of it is going to stay the same. There are a few things that we're going to add that will be genuinely different and new. We haven't done them before. The other things, well, we're probably going to modify some of the things that we're already doing. We might do them a bit quicker. We might do them slightly differently. We might do more of that or a bit less of that. But essentially, you know, it's still familiar territory. And then there are some things that we're going to stop doing entirely. So if you can frame the change in this way, it can take some of the fear of the change out of it. Importantly, the best change will be a change where most things stay the same. It'd be much easier to sell the change if most things stay the same. And if most of the things that you're going to stop doing are actually the bad things, the things that really cause frustration and annoyance, we're going to get rid of those. There will, be things sometimes that people are wedded to, that they enjoy doing, and you're saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. But if within the stop, we're going to stop doing a lot of the bad stuff as well, then that makes the change more palatable. The things we're going to modify, the things that genuinely add value. We're not going to modify things that don't add any value at all. If they don't add value, we're going to stop those. So these are just going to be increasing the value of what we do. So these are some significant benefits. And the best change is where we're actually not adding very much at all. Okay, so when you think about shaping change, and if you have control over the change, consider that model and how best to roll out and inform people about the change. So if we come back to my list where I started and what we need to do to overcome difficulties people have with change based on these things, if it's an issue to do with legitimacy, then we have to provide people the context. This is the context in CTQR. Give them the background, give them the information, give them the rationale, explain our thinking. If it's to do with proximity, then get close to them. Treat them with care and compassion, and give them time. Temper the change so we don't load it all on top of people all at once. So that means we have to coordinate the change across our businesses and our organizations. So we haven't got one department issuing one big change and another department issuing another big change all at the same time. Clarity about information and communication. We have to be honest, and it may feel like we're over communicating, but actually, particularly today, particularly in the circumstances we're in, we need to be communicating much, much more than perhaps we've ever done before. It's even more important that we communicate, keep in contact. In terms of pace, give people time to absorb, recognize that there will be a loser trap. We'll all fall into it. That will be a painful process. Give them time to learn the new habits, the new skills, and be very clear about what's going to change and what's not going to change. One of the books I wrote recently was called Small Change, Big Returns. I'm a big fan of small change. And I say you don't have to go large always with change. So where you can, keep it small and keep it simple, and absolutely involve people who are going to be affected by it in terms of shaping the change. And then for you personally, I'm going to finish now. For you personally, I'd offer this. As you encounter change yourself, this is a model I call BOP, stop and BOP. Instead of hurtling headlong into the change like a rabbit in the headlights, just stop for a moment, just take a moment to pause, just breathe, get your breath, get your control, and just have a look around. What is staying the same? What's being modified? What's stopping? What are we adding? Just get that perspective. Get it into perspective rather than, just losing yourself in it. Like you can't see the wood for the trees. And that in itself, with that level, of breathing control and mind control and seeing things as they really are, not as you fear they might be, can drive an extra level of positivity and give you that extra oomph to be able to go ahead and deal with it. So thanks everyone for watching and listening.
That was awesome. Firstly, you've stopped sharing your screen. Can we give a big round of applause to Tim? We've only got 4 minutes before it's 8 o'clock to go outside. So firstly, I think you'll all agree, I can't see everyone on the screen now, that was really good. I must admit, I wasn't sure where you were going in the beginning, telling us about yourself. But as you know, you're a dear friend of mine. I knew you'd be brilliant. That was really good, especially now in the pandemic, actually. And I think it's good to kind of reflect how we've all dealt with it and how we're going to deal with it, because the new changes, of course, we all need to try and get back to work. And the normal isn't going to be the normal. And so I think that was spot on.